Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And this is going to be a comics episode of Podcast Stardust, as we'll be breaking down the first two issues of Shadow of Maul. But before we get into the latest on Janix, Jay, remind everyone where we can be found on social media.
Absolutely, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram, conveniently, at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the digital line, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So as I said a moment ago, we're going to be talking about the first two issues of Shadow of Maul, which is a comic put out by Marvel, and serves as the prequel to Maul Shadow Lord. So before we get to discussion, I just want to go through some of the credits. This is written by Benjamin Percy. The artist is Madibek Musabekov. I'm trusting I got that right, but we'll find out. Color artist is Luis Guerrero. Letterer is VC's Joe Caramagna, and the cover was done by Derek Chu. So I'm trusting that our listeners watched Maul Shadow Lord earlier this year, which so far has been my favorite thing that's happened in Star Wars in 2026. And they understand the premise of what this is about. This is things that I guess happened in the days, weeks leading up to the events of Maul Shadow Lord here. And we'll get into some of the details, but I want to kind of get into a little bit of non-spoiler discussion first in case people haven't had a chance to read this and they want to know what we think before they pick it up. But Jay, what did you think about these first two issues overall?
Well, I have to say, I don't know about you, but I could 100% hear Larson and Two Boots' voices in my head the entire time I was reading this, which I love. So I think that it's great to be able to go back to these as a backstory after Maul, which I have to say also, this has definitely been the year for dark side users for us. I mean, we've had our Darth Bane book club, and then we did the entire Kylo Ren series of comics, and then, Legacy of Vader, and then now we're doing this one, Shadow Lord, with Maul. So we definitely are focusing on that. But what I love about this, and you know me, I love a good backstory, is just the focus on the fact that it's kind of the everyday Joe in Star Wars, and that's what Larson is. And so it doesn't matter where you go in the galaxy, corruption's still corruption, and he's dealing with it. And it just reminds us that the galaxy is just full of normal everyday kind of people that are missing their kids' games and having guilt about that as a dad and still trying to do the right thing for themselves, but also that this is kind of the reason why we understand where Larson is at the point. But yes, Lawson, so he is again, just having the cliff notes on what he was like before we get into the series, the animated series, and just understanding why he was just so thoroughly kind of done, with everything by that point.
Yeah. I like this quite a bit. I had a lot of fun running these first two issues of this. And I also like it because Nicodemus, the crime lord that we really got in just the first episode of Maul Shadow Lord, we get a bit more of him in this as well, which is cool because it seemed like a cool character that we hardly knew you because he gets disposed of pretty quickly in the series. I agree with you 100%. I could hear the voices for Lawson and Two Boots in my head like I just watched an episode of this.
Yes.
Especially Two Boots. I thought he was done incredibly close to the character that was presented to us in Shadow Lord. And I get the feeling with a lot of the tie-in materials that we get to shows and movies and stuff like that, that the authors that write these things are given material in advance, and sometimes things change. And so the characterizations that they provide aren't always 100% in line with what we end up seeing as a final product on screen.
Mm-hmm.
A key example, A New Dawn by John Jackson Miller. I think his portrayal of Kanan and Hera was pretty good, but it was more adjacent to Kanan and Hera that we actually knew from Rebels. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's probably resulted of him getting a characterization and stuff about those characters that was not finalized when he wrote that book. This seemed a bit more true. Like I said, especially with Two Boots, I think he was nailed on. Lawson, I always got the impression from the show was a little bit looser. That was the whole. He was a bit looser with the rules compared to Two Boots. That was the whole dynamic between those two characters, right? You know, that Two Boots was always about going by the book, reporting this to the right, you know, up the chain of command, the proper authorities, you know, the procedures dictate that they do things. Whereas Lawson's like, we can't do that because of these potential consequences. Where in this comic, it wasn't necessarily because of consequences, is that Lawson was painted a bit more as a wild card, in that, you know, it's a bit more outcome determinative for him, as opposed to again with Maul Shadow Lord, he didn't want to do certain things because if they made that report, the Empire would show up. Whereas in these comics, it's like, well, if I do that, then the bad guy is going to get away. It was more results oriented as opposed to consequences oriented in the show. Is that making sense? Am I just
Mm-hmm.
describing that at all?
No, I think that makes total sense, and I agree with you, and I think that comparison, is a good one. But I also think that it is very true to his character in a lot of ways, obviously to the animated series as well, down to him not wanting to talk until he got his calf, which
Mm-hmm.
I thought was just a really, really nice touch. But I can totally see where you're coming from there, and he's definitely more almost more jaded in some ways in this than, like you said, he was a little looser and kind of gruff, but yet still had that sense of humor. There's definitely none of that here for sure. But you
Yeah.
could still tell that, and there was one line somewhere in one of the first two comics where I believe it was Kleist that was talking to him about, oh, we don't want to have to call the Imperials, and Lawson's like, oh, I don't want that. So of
Right.
course that is setting that up for us as well.
Right. Okay, so we're about to drift into some spoiler discussion here. This is where this is going. So, um, let's just end the non-spoiler portion of this. I recommend it. I enjoyed it. It's definitely a good read, quick read. I feel like it really captured
Mhm.
the spirit, pace, and themes of the show. And so, yeah, I give it a thumbs up. How about you?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Can't wait to see where it goes.
All right. Well, then let's get into a bit more of the spoiler details. So, our first issue is called Broken Law, and it starts off with Lawson getting interviewed by this guy from Internal Investigations whose name is Claravine Rule, and it all has to do with a operation that Lawson was in charge of with Two Boots, where they basically infiltrated a smuggling operation with rare creatures that was being run out of a bar, and things go a bit sideways there. They don't get all the evidence they need so they can shut things down. And then Lawson gets assigned a squad that consists of himself, Two Bits, Hendrix, who's a guy with a red middle hand, and Jam Jam, which is another human, and then Fraxmore, which is an alien. And as they are basically watching someone in witness protection, for lack of a better description, things go down, and it turns out this Hendrix character is part of the criminal underworld that has turned on them. And so, um, yeah, so it's just kind of a look behind the curtain. It's, to me, this issue was setting up the griminess and the climate on Janix, which is that it is a haven for the underworld, and people like Lawson are doing their best to combat it, but they're doing it with like one hand tied behind their back in the
Mhm.
situation. But what's your takeaway on that?
Mhm. Yeah, he's got a difficult job with some hard choices, and I mentioned the corruption at the very beginning, and that's really the focus on here. And as you said, Janix is just really this backwater world in a lot of ways that these things can flourish. And just knowing that this alien trafficking essentially is happening and that he's trying to get to the bottom of it. But was the character of Clairvine Rule, is that an ISB agent? Is that what we're led to believe, basically? Or just...
No, he was introduced as internal affairs, internal
Okay.
investigations for the
So that
police
was just a
department there.
Janix. Okay.
Right. And so, and that makes sense because as you pointed out earlier here, Kleiss, Commander Kleiss, Commander Captain, I can't remember what her rank is, but the person in charge of the police there in Janix is saying that we got to watch our steps so the Empire doesn't show up. Well, if ISB's there, then they've already got a problem, which was not present in Shadow Lord. So
good point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, fun episode here. Two Boots is himself, always wanting to fun issue, I should say. Two Boots is himself. He's constantly wanting to go by the book, as we just said a moment ago, and report this up the chain of command and make the proper referrals and reports and stuff like that. And Lawson's like, yes, but then we lose our investigation. And again, as I was saying, kind of the non-spoiler thing here, I think he came off just a bit more gruff than the way we saw him in Shadow Lord, with maybe the exception of the last couple episodes of that, like when everything's gone to hell. But here it is, it's just there's a lot less like, buddy camaraderie type of statements between him and Two Boots here. But how would you characterize their relationship?
No, I think you're right. And again, Two Boots is just written so well. But yeah, Lawson definitely feels rougher, more tired, more weathered. The reasons that he has trust issues is really kind of established here for sure. But and the fact that he doesn't believe that victory is permanent. He understands that victory is very temporary, especially when he gets the rug pulled out from underneath him. For example, when he goes to the bar and all of that happens. And then again, the asset in the safe house thing too. That whole situation that went down with the mole that was part of the group, so to speak.
Hendrix turned on him right there.
You don't recognize me because of the red arm.
Yeah, that was a great callback.
But you do recognize me because of the red arm.
Yeah, saw him at the bar. So
exactly.
Yeah, I found it kind of. I wish they had spent a few more panels, a few more pages with that whole thing with the asset there at that scene, because I don't want to say it was rushed, but maybe a little incomplete on the whole thing there. Because Fraxmore just disappears, and they're still looking for him, but that's not resolved in these first two issues. Maybe it is by the end of the series. I don't know, but I kind of I would like a little bit more transition, a little bit more discussion about what's going on here, and again, it seemed like in an otherwise great issue, this needed just a bit more explanation.
Yeah, and I agree, but then again, I also think that it's maybe not the main focus anyway. You know what I mean? Because obviously our big baddie's coming.
Sure. Focus or not, though, it could have been clearer, is I guess my point. And that is why you need a few more panels. It's not that you need to make it a bigger part of the story. You just need to make it clear as to what's going on, I suppose. But that's my point on that one.
No, good observation.
But speaking of our big baddie, the last page or two deals with Darth Maul. And we find him talking to a smuggler about his ship and what the ship can do. And then Maul says, yes, I'll take your ship, but not you, and takes him out. What did you think about that? I mean, on the one hand, I think it's like, okay, that's something Maul would do, but it wasn't exactly what Maul was doing in Shadow Lord. But what did you think?
I guess it was just a means to an end is the way that I saw it, where Maul needed a way to get from point A to point B. And so he took an opportunity to maybe fly under the radar, so to speak. And that's what he wanted to do, because obviously the reason that he went to Janix, we know, is to be under the radar and to lay low and to be incognito for what he
get
had
revenge.
planned.
I mean, he went there to take out negative. Okay. See, here's what bothered me, I guess, about this is that in Shadow Lord, Maul was very, very thoughtful. The people that he was after, the people he was killing in Shadow Lord, were those that had wronged him and the people that supported them in this situation. There isn't any indication that this poor smuggler was working for Nicodemus or, anybody, any of the gangsters that abandoned Maul in his time of need on this. It was a bit more wanton. Whereas, again, I feel like Shadow Lord did such a great job as painting Maul as the thoughtful former Sith Lord who is laying schemes. And so what was the point of killing the smuggler here? Did the smuggler didn't do anything? There was nothing demonstrated in the pages that the smuggler needed to die, I suppose. And again, was this something that Maul might have done during Clone Wars? Perhaps, but it just seemed a little bit different than the character we met in Shadow Lord.
No, I can see where you're going with that. I just think he was in his way, and Maul's just that ruthless.
Well, again, to me, that is the Maul from Clone Wars, and not necessarily the Maul from Shadow Lord, because he went out of his way to try and negotiate with Lawson and Shadow Lord and Jedi. He made offers to all of them, gave them opportunities, gave people an opportunity to swear allegiance. He stopped killing henchmen of the various crime lords when they pledged their fealty to him. So I don't know. This seemed, I'm not going to make too big a deal out of it, but it just seems a bit of a contrast to what we saw in Shadow Lord.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting takeaway, and it's definitely one that I had not occurred to me. So I'm glad you brought it up.
All right. Well, issue 2, I forgot to write down what this one was called, but regardless, is Lawson and Two Boots running surveillance on Nicodemus, and they discover that he's getting ready to sell $20 million credits worth, I should say, of weapons to somebody. And Lawson is basically saying that he can't let this happen because the crime lords are all basically in equilibrium right now. And if Nicodemus suddenly gets 20 million credits, that's going to put him in a different position than the rest of the crime lords. And it's going to have severe consequences for Janix, because I'm reading between the lines, but I think the fear is that Nicodemus will make a move against these other crime lords to try and consolidate his power, lead to more violence, more problems for the rest of the city there. And so basically he and Two Boots set out to interfere with this, and to the extent that they get Ludivario involved, and he shows up. And not only that, this weapon, the guy who wants to purchase the weapons, his droid is the one that Lawson gets the details out of, and he doesn't come back. And so the purchaser leaves without buying the weapons, and that prevents the whole scheme from happening in the first place. I thought this was a pretty clever story. And that, it's not Lawson so much, growling in the face of authority, but doing what he needs to do in a way that even Two Boots approves of in this situation to prevent this imbalance from happening.
Until he gets on the train, of course.
Right.
But
yeah.
But no, I think it's important to establish what the underworld and the crime bosses are all about, especially before we get to the series. And and seeing that rivalry between Ludivario and Nicodemus, and how they were against each other, and seeing Ludi in his spacesuit type thing, his mech suit. I have forgotten about that because we only saw
I'm glad
that
you brought that up.
Yeah.
I had forgot. He was only in that first episode.
Right.
Of Shadow Lord.
Exactly.
And then we got to see him as, the little lean that's wandering around the entire time. And so it was a bit jarring, but that's the way he was.
Exactly. And not only that, but he was definitely a lot more intimidating in that. So you can see where he got a lot of his confidence from wearing that as well. But again, Lawson really was putting himself out there, and he got the crap beat out of him too for it.
Yeah, he did. It's kind of funny when I'm thinking about Ludivario now. He's in Alina, and just last week we did that episode of the Clone Wars on the show where 3PO and R2D2 and Commander Wolf went to Alina. And those were far different characters than Ludi Vargo were.
Yes.
Ludi is the scheming crime lord, and those guys, what's the best way to describe them? I mean, other than,
Primitive.
we could, well, yeah, they were the Ewok stand-ins, is what we said last
Exactly.
week when we talked about this. And, they were interested in making peace with the ground, as they put it. So,
Right. Yeah, and Ludi is definitely not that.
no, much more sophisticated, not in a good way necessarily, but
Right.
I don't know what else to say about that portion of that issue there. I mean, I think it's very effective storytelling. I don't have the same criticism of the whole thing with the asset being protected and Hendrix betraying things that I did from the first issue. I think this one was tidy, it was clean, it was succinct and forthright. This part, we'll get to the Maul portion at the end here in just a second here, but well written, and they communicated what we need to know. As you pointed out, it gives us more background to the status quo amongst the gangsters and why what happens in those first couple episodes of the series makes such a big deal.
For sure.
But the issue does end with our next glimpse of Maul, and this is him arriving on Janix and the smuggler ship who he just killed, and he's met by Scorn and Icarus, and he gives them a command to melt the ship. So not a whole lot to reflect on there, but he has arrived.
Yes. And what a presence he is, for sure.
Yeah.
So we just know that, everyone's playing a chess game. They think that they are anyways on Janix, and Maul's going to come in and flip the Dajaric table, the chess table, so to speak.
I'm kind of wondering, we are a couple more issues into the series. I don't know if all 5 of them are out yet, but at least 3 and 4 I know are. And I haven't read ahead yet. We covered these 2 because when we decided to do this, we didn't know how much was going to be in them. And regardless, the series is called Shadow of Maul. And so there's a bit of Maul at the end of each of these first 2 issues. But so far, there is no hint on Janix amongst the crime lords or with the police in the form of Lawson or Two Boots or Clythe or Commander Clythe that he's about to show up and cause anything. So I'm pretty eager to see what's going to happen in these little vignettes at the end of each one of these issues, so that by the end of issue 5, that there is this for the Shadow Maul, some sort of rumor, some sort of presence, something is going on, pulling the strings, behind the scenes there, that's going to tip off the authorities that something bigger is happening.
Yes. And I think it's going to take a while. I don't think it's going to happen necessarily, within the next episode, or I'm saying it now too, issue or 2. I think it's going to really culminate towards the end.
Right. But I'm excited for it. So
me too.
This is a short conversation, but I think we've covered most everything, unless there's anything else you want to bring up that we haven't discussed yet.
Not really. Again, I just really appreciate Lawson as a character, and just the fact that, again, he's just a dad trying to, make his way in the universe, as Django would say.
This series would have been fun as like an audio drama, and getting the actors back to do the voices on that.
Oh,
and especially
sure.
if it was told first person noir style from Lawson's perspective. How cool would that have been?
Yes, because it works so well in that way. And he's just got such a charismatic presence that it would have worked so well. Yeah. Maybe.
Well, and I also like the he does the narrating here, and he's talking, he sets up each one of the scenes, so it would fit into kind of that hard-boiled detective noir type style if they wanted to do something like that. So, hey, Star Wars,
make it happen.
Yeah, we got ideas.
We do. Yes, that's right. Podcast Stardust at gmail.com.
Okay. Kevin Scott on writing the Robin. So yeah.
Oh, it would be so good.
Yeah, have him partner up with Benjamin Percy here and get that done. Okay.
There you go.
Well, shorter episode than what we usually do on Wednesdays, but we've had a lot of longer ones that have gone to like an hour and a half lately. So we're going to go ahead and call it a wrap for this episode. But thank you all for joining us on Podcast Stardust as we discuss these 2 issues. We'll get to the last 3 sometime in the next month or so. We're eager to do it. It's just a matter of finding time with all the other things that we have going on a monthly basis. And if you've enjoyed this discussion, and we do talk comics from time to time, and you want to get our thoughts on those comics, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. We're available on pretty much all the podcatchers, and we do greatly appreciate when you do subscribe, like, rate, review, comment, and the such. I try and collect those things from time to time so that we can react to them, and I'd love to hear from you. And Jay will give you our social media contacts here in a second. I'd like to remind you that the entire back catalog of 1,069 shows are available over on retrozap.com. We are part of the RetroZap Podcast Network with a bunch of other great shows. Right now, Enjoy Stuff and Superhero Suite are the two biggest other active shows on the network, and they've been putting out some great content. I was talking about Dungeon Crawler Carl when we did the news last Friday, and I know they brought it up on their show as well. So make sure you go check out what they are up to. So, Jay, where are we located on social media again, and where else can we be found online?
Yeah, so it's super easy to find us. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can always check out our Pinterest boards, and you can also download and listen to all of our shows over on our two YouTube outlets. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So no video, just audio, but you can definitely catch all of the episodes there. And like I said, share those out with your friends. And if you'd like to drop us a line, as I briefly mentioned just a minute or so ago, we are at podcaststardust@gmail.com. So if you have something that is a little longer message that doesn't neatly fit into some of the other formats, we would very much welcome emails of any type. Especially, we'd love to have you ask us questions. We're still waiting on those listener questions. So please drop us a line. And then if you'd like to pick up one of our fashionable TeePublic t-shirts or perhaps a coffee mug, you can do so over on the TeePublic site, and the link to that is in our show notes, and you've got lots to pick from. So there's 7 different show logo designs, and if you've been paying attention to our show art that Dennis puts together, he does change up some of those logos in the show art, and those are what is available over on TeePublic. So once again, the link is in our show notes.
Okay. Upcoming on the show on Friday, we'll wrapping up the week with a look at recent Star Wars news. And then on Monday, we'll be getting into episode 2 of The Ninth Jedi. So make sure you stick around for those. Okay. Thanks for listening to episode 1070 of Podcast Stars, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.